Please, Kola. I love you so much. Marry me.
You once saved my life in the past, so I am here for you today.
People gathered in confusion that morning, whispering and pointing toward the city's busiest junction, where a strange sight held everyone's attention. A beautiful young woman, dressed in a flowing white designer gown that shimmered under the sun, was kneeling before a man everyone in the city knew only as Madman Cola. The crowd gasped. Car horns blared. Hawkers froze in disbelief. For years, Cola had roamed the streets, barefoot, dirty, and muttering to himself. Some said he once had a bright future. Others believed he was cursed. But never, not even in a dream, had anyone imagined that the richest girl in town, Adanna, the daughter of Chief Obinna, would kneel before him, tears in her eyes, begging him to marry her. "Cola, please. I'm begging you," Adanna cried, her voice trembling. The diamond ring in her hand sparkled as she held it up toward him. The madman blinked, scratching his unkempt beard. His clothes were torn, his hair matted, and a faint smell of dust and sweat lingered around him. People laughed, thinking it was some kind of publicity stunt. "She must be shooting a movie," one man said. No, it's madness," another woman hissed, clutching her basket of fruits. "A billionaire's daughter begging a lunatic? Impossible." But Adanna wasn't acting. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Her voice was desperate. Something about her sincerity made even the mocking crowd fall silent after a while. Cola stared at her for a long time, his lips twitching as if trying to remember how to speak. Then, in a deep voice that no one had ever heard from him before, he said, "Do you know what you're asking for?" Gasps rippled through the air. The madman could talk, clearly and calmly. The same man who spent his days chasing after pigeons and dancing under the rain now spoke like a professor addressing his class. Adanna nodded slowly, tears running down her cheeks. "Yes," she said. "I know who you are, and I know what I'm asking for." Whispers erupted. "She knows him. What does she mean? Is he not mad?" The police patrol nearby moved closer, unsure if they should intervene. The media vans that often hovered around the area for breaking news began to arrive. Cameramen jumped out, pointing their lenses toward the kneeling girl and the man who had just shocked the entire city. Adanna took a deep breath and continued. "5 years ago, before you lost everything, you saved my life. You may not remember, but I remember. You pulled me out of that burning car on the highway. You were injured, and before anyone could thank you, you disappeared. I searched for you everywhere, but no one knew where you went. Until one day, I saw you here on the streets, dirty and broken. I tried to reach out, but you ran. I didn't care what people said. I knew you weren't mad. I knew something happened to you." Cola's eyes darted around as if trying to make sense of her words. He stepped back slowly, shaking his head. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. "You shouldn't have come." The crowd fell dead silent. Adanna wiped her tears and stood, refusing to leave. "I came because I made a promise to myself," she said, her voice firm. "That if I ever found you again, I'd repay you with my whole heart. You gave me life when I had nothing to offer you. Now I'm giving you mine." And with that, she dropped the ring at his feet. The silence that followed was heavy. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then suddenly, something in
Please,
Cola's
I love you
expression
so
changed.
much. Marry
His
me.
eyes, which moments ago looked lost and unfocused, grew clear. His shoulders straightened. His trembling hands steadied. He stared at the ring, then at her, then at the crowd. "Do you all think this is funny?" he said quietly, his voice filled with authority. The laughter that had begun to rise died immediately. His tone didn't sound like that of a madman. It carried weight, dignity, and power. Adanna stepped back, surprised by the sudden change. Cola reached down, picked up the ring, and looked at it for a long moment. "You shouldn't have done this in front of them," he said softly. "You've just changed everything." Before anyone could ask what he meant, 3 black SUVs rolled into the scene from nowhere, their tinted windows gleaming. The crowd instinctively stepped back. The vehicles stopped just a few feet away. The doors opened in perfect sync, and out stepped men in dark suits and earpieces, bodyguards. The entire city junction went into chaos. People screamed. Journalists pushed closer. Who are they? What's happening? The man everyone thought was a madman stood tall now. He brushed the dirt off his tattered shirt and whispered something to one of the suited men. The man nodded respectfully. Then Cola turned back to Adanna, who looked utterly confused. "Cola," she whispered, her heart pounding. "What's going on?" He smiled faintly, a mix of sadness and pride in his eyes. You should have never remembered me, he said. But since you did, I guess the truth can't stay buried anymore. The bodyguards formed a circle around him as he slowly began walking toward one of the SUVs. The crowd parted like a sea. Cameras flashed. The police didn't even dare to stop him. Adanna ran after him, grabbing his arm. Kola, please don't leave me again. Who are you? He turned to her, his face calm now, the madness completely gone. I am not Kola, he said quietly. That was just a name I used to hide. The air seemed to thicken. Even the city noise faded away. Then who are you? She asked, tears falling once more. He looked into her eyes, and with a deep breath, he said something that made everyone around freeze in shock. But before the words could fully leave his lips, someone from the crowd screamed his real name. The sound of it rolled through the air like thunder. And just like that, everything changed. Prince Kamalu, someone shouted from the crowd. The name echoed through the air like a lightning strike. Everyone turned to stare at the supposed madman, their eyes wide, their mouths open. The reporters froze. The police officer who had been holding his baton dropped it to the ground. Even the wind seemed to pause again. Prince Kamalu? Adanna repeated in disbelief, her voice trembling. You can't be. But the man only smiled faintly, his eyes carrying a mix of pain and quiet pride. I was, he said. A long time ago. The crowd began to murmur again, louder this time. Prince Kamalu? The missing heir of the Okuta kingdom? No. He died years ago. They said his plane crashed in the mountains. Kola, or rather Prince Kamalu, lifted his gaze toward the horizon as if remembering something distant and painful. They said I died because it was easier for them that way, he murmured. Adanna shook her head, trying to make sense of it all. So all these years you were alive? Pretending to be mad. He turned to her, his expression soft. Not pretending, he said quietly. I truly lost everything, my memory, my people, my purpose. I woke up on the streets with no name, no past, and no future. I didn't even know who I was until a few months ago when fragments of my memory began to return. The men in suits exchanged uneasy glances, clearly aware that something big was unfolding in public. One of them whispered urgently, Your Highness, we need to leave now. The media is here. The world will know. Kamalu raised a hand to silence him, his eyes still on Adanna. Let them know, he said calmly. For too long, I hid in the shadows while those who betrayed me ruled in my name. The words struck Adanna like a wave. Betrayed you? Who? He smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. My uncle, he said. He was supposed to be my protector after my father died. Instead, he tried to kill me and take the throne. When the plane went down, he made sure no one found me alive. He thought I was gone forever. Adanna covered her mouth in shock. Around them, phones were already recording, the video streaming live across social media. The comments were pouring in. The madman is a prince? Breaking news. Lost royal heir found. Unbelievable. Kamalu took a step closer to her. And now, because of you, the world will know I'm alive, he said. You've brought me back to life in more ways than one. Adanna didn't know whether to cry or smile. Her heart was racing. Then will you still marry me? She asked softly, her voice shaking. Not because of what you were, but because of who you are now. A quiet laugh escaped his lips, gentle and full of wonder. You're brave, Adanna, he said. Even now, when you could walk away, you choose to stand by a man the world once called mad. I saw your soul when everyone else saw madness, she replied. For a moment, time seemed to freeze between them. Two people from different worlds, connected by fate. But before the moment could last, the sound of engines roared in the distance. Another convoy of vehicles was approaching fast, this time black jeeps with flashing blue lights. The men in suits suddenly grew tense. Your Highness, that's them, one said urgently. Your uncle's men. They've found you. The crowd began to scatter in panic. Reporters ducked behind their vans. Police officers took cover. Adanna looked around in fear as Kamalu's guards formed a protective circle around him. They won't stop until they silence me, Kamalu said grimly. They can't afford for me to return to the palace. Adanna grabbed his arm. Then we need to run. Kamalu shook his head. No, I've run for too long. It ends today. He looked at his men and nodded once. Instantly, they opened one of the SUVs, revealing a hidden compartment with a sleek briefcase inside. Kamalu took it, opened it, and pulled out a golden insignia, the royal seal of Okuta Kingdom. The symbol glittered under the sunlight, and the crowd gasped once more. This, Kamalu said, raising it high, is proof that I am who I claim to be. Let the world see it. Dozens of cameras zoomed in, broadcasting the moment live. His uncle's men screeched to a halt as they arrived, stepping out of their jeeps with weapons drawn. But it was too late. The entire world was watching. Adanna clung to his arm, terrified yet amazed by his courage. Kamalu turned to her, his voice calm amidst the chaos. No matter what happens next, he said softly, you gave me something my crown never could, truth. Gunshots rang out in the distance, shattering the air. Screams erupted as people ran in all directions. Kamalu's guards pushed Adanna to the ground, shielding her. Stay down, one of them shouted. But Kamalu didn't move. He stood tall, facing the approaching men, his eyes burning with quiet fury. The leader of the armed group stepped forward, sneering. You should have stayed dead, Prince. Kamalu smiled faintly. You should have finished the job when you had the chance. Then, with a voice that carried over the chaos, he said something that would be remembered forever. Okuta shall rise again. And in that instant, a blast of smoke erupted as his guards counterattacked. The street vanished into confusion. Smoke, shouts, the sound of engines, gunfire, and panic. Adanna screamed his name, but all she could see were flashes of movement and silhouettes in the haze. Kamalu, she cried again, coughing through the smoke. No one answered. Then, through the swirling dust, she saw a shadow moving toward her, a tall figure, limping slightly, clutching something close to his chest. Adanna, came the faint voice. Come with me, we don't have much time. She rushed to him, her heart pounding, as they disappeared into the alleyways, the sound of sirens fading behind them. But even as they ran, she could feel it, this was only the beginning. They ran for what felt like hours, twisting through narrow alleys behind the marketplace, past broken walls painted with old election posters and the smell of roasted corn hanging in the air. Adanna's once pristine white gown was now smeared with dust and mud. Her hair clung to her face, her breath heavy, but she didn't stop. Not when the man beside her, Prince Kamalu, once a madman, now a fugitive, kept urging her forward with quiet urgency. When they finally stopped behind an abandoned warehouse near the city's edge, Kamalu leaned against a wall, panting. They won't stop until I'm dead, he said, his voice low, calm, but burning with anger. They control the police, the army, even the palace guards. But they don't control the people, and that's what they fear. Adanna looked at him, her chest heaving. You just exposed yourself to the entire world, she said. Every news channel is talking about you right now. Your uncle must be furious. Kamalu smiled faintly. Good, he said. Let him be. The more he panics, the more mistakes he'll make. Adanna moved closer to him, noticing the blood on his sleeve. You're hurt, she whispered, reaching out. He looked down at his arm as if seeing it for the first time. It's nothing, he muttered. Just a graze. But it wasn't just a graze. The bullet had cut a deep line across his arm, staining his shirt crimson. Adanna tore a piece from her gown and wrapped it around the wound, tightening it until he winced. You may be a prince, she said softly, but you still bleed like the rest of us. Kamalu chuckled weakly. And you still talk too much for someone who just risked her life for a lunatic. I'd do it again, she said, meeting his eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt heavy, alive, as if the world outside had gone quiet just to watch them breathe. Then Kamalu turned toward the warehouse door and pushed it open. Inside was darkness, except for the faint light of a single lantern flickering in the corner. A man was sitting there, waiting. He stood as they entered. Your Highness, the man said, bowing deeply. Adanna froze. Who is this? She asked. Kamalu walked forward slowly. Someone I thought I'd never see again, he said. My father's advisor, Chief Balogun. The old man looked weary but strong. His eyes held wisdom and loyalty that hadn't faded with time. I knew you were alive, Balogun said. I searched for years, but your uncle made sure anyone who looked for you disappeared. When I heard whispers of a madman in the city who looked like the late king, I hoped it was you. Kamalu nodded. He nearly succeeded, Chief. I lost my memory. For years, I wandered as a beggar. But now, thanks to her, he said, glancing at Adanna, I remember everything. Balogun bowed his head. The kingdom has suffered in your absence, my prince. Your uncle has drained the treasury, silenced the chiefs, and turned the palace into a fortress. But the people still remember your father. They still believe the rightful heir will return. Kamalu's eyes darkened. Then that's exactly what I'll do, he said. I'll return. But not as a beggar or a ghost. This time, I'll come back with truth and justice on my side. Adanna stepped forward. But how? You just said he controls the police and the army. You can't walk into the palace without being killed. Kamalu turned to her, a faint, knowing smile tugging at his lips. You forget who you're talking to, Adanna. I may have lost my crown, but I didn't lose my mind. Balogun opened a briefcase sitting on a table. Inside were documents, maps, and photographs. He pointed to one, an image of the royal palace. There's a secret passage under the old shrine in the forest. Your father built it as an escape route during the war. No one but the royal bloodline knows about it. Your uncle never discovered it. Kamalu studied the map carefully. If we use the passage, we can get into the palace undetected, he said. But I'll need proof, documents, recordings, something that shows what he's done. Balogun nodded. We've been gathering evidence for years. Embezzlement, assassinations, illegal arms deals, it's all here. He slid a folder across the table. But you'll need to broadcast it publicly, through the state media. Once the people see the truth, they'll rise. Adanna stepped closer, looking at the folder. Then we do it tonight, she said boldly, before he has a chance to silence us. Kamalu hesitated, looking at her with concern. Adanna, this isn't your fight. You've already risked too much. She raised her chin defiantly. You said your people believe the rightful heir will return. Well, maybe it's time you believed in something too. Balogun smiled faintly. She has your mother's courage, my prince. Kamalu exhaled slowly, realizing there was no stopping her. All right, he said. We do it tonight. As they prepared to move, the sound of thunder rumbled in the distance. The rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavy, drumming against the metal roof. It felt like the heavens themselves were warning them of the storm ahead. By midnight, they were in the forest. The path was dark and slippery, the air thick with the scent of wet earth. Kamalu led the way, lantern in hand, his wounded arm still bandaged. Adanna followed close behind, her gown now torn and soaked, but her spirit unbroken. Finally, they reached the shrine, a moss-covered structure with carvings faded by time. Kamalu knelt beside an old stone slab and pressed a hidden symbol. With a deep rumble, the ground shifted, revealing a staircase leading down into darkness. This is it, he said. Balogun handed him a small flashlight. Once you enter, there's no turning back. The tunnel leads straight to the royal chambers. Adanna looked into the dark passage, her heart pounding. Then let's end this, she whispered. And together, they descended into the shadows, unaware that above the forest, dozens of armed men were already closing in, following their every step. The trap had already been set. The tunnel was cold and damp, the air thick with the scent of old stone and history. Every step echoed softly as Kamalu led the way, the dim beam of the flashlight cutting through the darkness. Adanna stayed close, clutching his hand, her heart hammering in her chest. Somewhere above, the sound of rain and distant gunfire echoed faintly. It was as if the entire world held its breath, waiting for what would happen next. After what felt like hours, they reached a heavy iron door carved with the royal insignia. Kamalu placed his palm against it, and with a deep metallic groan, it opened. They stepped into the royal chamber, silent, vast, and hauntingly familiar. The portraits of his ancestors hung on the walls, now covered in dust. The throne at the far end glimmered faintly under the flickering torches. Kamalu took a deep breath. I never thought I'd see this place again, he whispered. Before Adanna could speak, a slow clap echoed from the shadows. Touching, came a cold voice. Truly touching. They turned sharply. From behind the throne emerged a tall man in royal robes, flanked by soldiers. His eyes were sharp, his smile cruel. Uncle, Kamalu said quietly. Ah, so the ghost returns, the man sneered. You should have stayed dead, boy. Now you've come to die properly. Kamalu didn't flinch. No, uncle. I've come to end this. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, Balogun's camera. The red light on it blinked. This is being broadcast live, Kamalu said. Every word you say, every truth you've hidden, it's all going to the people. For the first time, fear flashed in the old man's eyes. You wouldn't dare. Oh, but I would, Kamalu said calmly. You stole my father's throne. You killed those who stood for justice. You destroyed lives to feed your greed. And today the world sees you for what you are. The old king's face twisted with rage. Kill him, he screamed. The soldiers raised their weapons, but before they could fire, the palace doors burst open. The city guards, real loyalists of the late king, stormed in shouting, For the true heir. Protect Prince Kamalu. The chamber erupted into chaos. Gunfire roared. Smoke filled the air. Kamalu shielded Adanna, pulling her toward the throne's side passage. "Stay behind me," he shouted. It felt like forever before the sounds faded, replaced by silence. When the smoke cleared, the old king lay on the floor, defeated, surrounded by his disarmed soldiers. The people outside the palace were cheering. The broadcast had worked. Kamalu stood over his uncle, his expression solemn. "You had everything," he said softly. "Power, respect, and family. But you chose greed." The old man glared at him with fading strength. "And you chose weakness," he spat. Kamalu shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "I chose truth." He turned and walked toward the balcony overlooking the palace courtyard. Thousands of people were gathered below, chanting his name. Rain poured down, but no one cared. Kamalu raised his hand, the royal seal shining in it. The crowd roared in triumph. Adanna stood beside him, drenched and exhausted, but smiling through her tears. The madman had become a prince again. The lost heir had returned. That night, the bells of Okuta rang across the city for the first time in years. The kingdom had a new ruler, one born not from ambition, but from humility and pain. As the celebrations echoed into the dawn, Kamalu and Adanna stood together in the quiet of the throne room. He turned to her, eyes soft. "You saved me, Adanna. Not just from the streets, but from myself." She smiled. "Maybe we saved each other." He took her hand gently. "Then may our kingdom rise on that truth." Outside, the storm finally broke, and sunlight pierced through the clouds. The long night was over. Moral lesson: true nobility is not measured by crowns, wealth, or power. It is found in humility, courage, and love. Even those the world calls mad may carry a wisdom that the proud cannot see. And sometimes the greatest kingdoms are not built by bloodline, but by hearts that refuse to give up on what is right.